Hey everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. So the Biden administration has released some final guidance on the Build America, Buy America Act, which was part of the Infrastructure Act, and that will have an impact on BEAD construction and dollars, those kinds of things. So I'll be right back with the details. Thanks for joining me. Rick Husey here with Z-Quorum. So this document came out a couple of days ago. This is on the whitehouse.gov site. I've linked to this in the details, as well as I think the two files that you can actually get from the bottom of this document. When I get down there, you'll see there's links to there as well. But so you see here, Biden-Harris administration releases final guidance to bolster American-made goods in federal infrastructure projects. So this applies to all federal infrastructure projects. We've been talking about this for BEAD because this came up with this was part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, this Build America, Buy America thing, and part of that was all kinds of infrastructure projects, not just BEAD, but BEAD is the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, and then there's other infrastructure kinds of funds that are in that act. But this would apply to federal infrastructure projects going forward as well. So not just for the IIJA, but for other federal programs in the future as well, and maybe even some that are out now that I would think were passed at a certain time. So primarily, though, we're interested here as being broadband, and it would be the BEAD program. So I just read a little bit out of this, and I'll show you what the two documents are that are available as well that I've linked to. So you see here, talks about President Biden. It says his plan, Bidenomics, which I find funny because this was actually, I think, a pejorative that Republicans kind of put on him because of some issues with the economy, but they've kind of embraced that, kind of like I think Obamacare was embraced to kind of give it a positive spin. So his plan, Bidenomics, is rooted in the recognition that the best way to grow the economy is from the middle out and the bottom up. This includes rebuilding our roads and bridges using made in America materials built by workers across America. And I think that's a worthy goal. So this is something we definitely want to make sure that we're making as much stuff here in this country as we can. And that will obviously help with jobs as well as security and some other things on a lot of these different products and materials. So during the State of the Union address, President Biden committed to ensuring construction materials used in federally funded infrastructure projects are made in America. Today, delivering on the president's commitments, the OMB released final guidance to boost the use of American-made goods in infrastructure projects, which will bolster American businesses, workers, and economic growth. So there was some original guidance, preliminary guidance given, and this is the final guidance, although there still could be some changes we'll see in the next document, or one of the documents that we were looking at here. The final guidance will support implementation of the bipartisan infrastructure law, or BIL, also known as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the IIJA. That's the actual official name, I believe. But they started calling it, I think, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law after that. So it's will support implementation of the BIL, or the IIJA, statutory requirements that manufactured products, construction materials, and iron and steel used in federally funded infrastructure projects are made in America. It also sets forth these standards for construction materials while serving as a guide to agencies and using taxpayer dollars to strengthen our economy by supporting the creation of good jobs in both construction and manufacturing by expanding domestic production through infrastructure investment. So again, the good thing about the infrastructure law is it does have this emphasis on trying to, it's the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So if you're going to be building infrastructure, you want to try to make that produce as many jobs as possible. That can be an issue, an impediment for lower prices or lower costs, I should say, and in timely acquisition of materials, those kinds of things. So that's a balance you have to make, and there's some leeway for waivers and things like that. So I think the rules are going to be pretty hard and fast, other than when there are some mitigating circumstances that would require, let's say, a waiver in certain situations. So down at the bottom here, you'll see there's additional information on this final guidance that's like an FAQ, which I'll look at here in a moment, and then the final guidance text, which again is almost final, not quite. So this is kind of the FAQ, the key provisions. A little background here. November 15th, 2021, the President signed the infrastructure law, which includes the Build America, Buy America Act. So this Build America, Buy America is part of the Infrastructure Act. BABA, or would that be BABA? Tomato. BABA establishes a domestic content preference for federal financial assistance obligated for infrastructure projects. The BABA, I think I like BABA. The BABA preference applies to 3 separate product categories: iron or steel products, manufactured products, and construction materials. In February 2023, the OMB issued proposed guidance to support implementation of the BABA provisions of the bill, the BIL. Today, OMB issues final guidance to take effect 60 days after publication in the Federal Register. So it's got to get published in the Federal Register, and what they've released is actually a preliminary version, but probably almost final. So we'll see that here in a moment. So there's, again, kind of like an FAQ here. So question, do BABA preferences only apply to funding under the infrastructure law, or do they apply to all federal awards where there is construction for infrastructure? And this says it applies to all federal financial assistance, whether or not funded through the infrastructure law or funds are for a project for infrastructure. So what are the main differences between this final guidance and the initial guidance? One key difference relates to the definition for all manufacturing processes for construction materials. Under the first version, only the final and immediately preceding manufacturing processes are covered. The final guidance defines all manufacturing processes for a construction material which must occur in the U.S. Another key difference between the first version and the final guidance is the specific method for distinguishing between the categories of products that Buy America preferences apply to: steel and iron, manufactured products, and construction materials, and aggregates and cement, which are also referred to in the guidance as section 70917C materials. What is the Buy America requirement for manufactured product, for a manufactured product? So again, this would be a lot of the kinds of things that we need to have for the deployment of fiber infrastructure, including things like OLTs, the equipment that would sit in a back office or out in the field that all of the CPE, the customer premises equipment, connects to, as well as other kinds of manufactured things, and fiber optic cable, which fiber optic cable is considered construction materials. So it says here that manufactured products must be manufactured in the U.S. and the cost of components of a manufactured product that are manufactured in the U.S. must exceed 55% of the cost of all components. And we knew that going in. There's a little further guidance on that in this larger text. Final guidance further provides that manufactured products means articles, materials, or supplies that have been 1, processed into a specific form and shape, or 2, combined with other articles, materials, or supplies to create a product with different properties than the individual articles, materials, or supplies. And that's interesting because, again, fiber optic cable is considered not a manufactured product, but a construction product. So they're looking at it, I guess, from the sense of if you're going to install fiber, one of the construction materials would be fiber optic cable. But fiber optic cable on its own is a manufactured product. One of the commenters said if you can buy it in a store, it's probably a manufactured product. In other words, they've got to manufacture it and then somebody buys it. But it is a construction material according to the guidance here. The final guidance also clarifies that construction materials and iron or steel products should not be considered manufactured products. Do components need to be produced in the U.S. to allow the manufactured product to qualify? The Act requires that more than 55% of the cost of components be manufactured in the U.S. This does not require all components to be produced in the United States. So you can get components from somewhere else. It's just that 55% of everything, of the cost of it, needs to be from the U.S. A few other things. What does predominantly iron or steel mean in the definition of iron or steel products? Predominantly iron or steel means that the cost of iron or steel content of a product is more than 50% of the total cost of all its components. What is the Buy America requirement for iron and steel? BABA states that in the case of iron or steel products, all manufacturing processes from the initial melting stage through the application of coatings must occur in the United States. It's interesting because it doesn't mention, the ore itself and where that's from, but it's the process there, I guess. What is considered a construction material in this guidance? Construction materials include, and you see all these non-ferrous materials, plastic and polymer-based products, including polyvinyl chloride, composite building materials, polymers used in fiber optic cables, and I'm sure this conduit and those kinds of things. Then you've got glass, glass could be just glass, but also including optic glass, which would be the glass that's in fiber. And then you've got fiber optic cable, including drop cable. And this was a clarification here, I believe, in this final guidance, where not just a fiber optic cable running down the street, but drop cables that are going from somewhere on the curb to the home also count as fiber optic cable. And then optical fiber. So it's a little confusing. You've got, they talk about optic glass in here, fiber optic cable, and optical fiber, but they're all considered construction materials. But in a couple of different cases here, including these plastics and polymers and glass and or optical fiber, and then a lot of those are going to make up the fiber optic cable. So you're using some of these materials to manufacture fiber optic cable, but fiber optic cable is still considered a construction material because then it's a piece of what's going into the process of constructing the fiber optic network, I guess is the way they look at it. Then you got lumber, engineered wood, and drywall. Obviously a lot of the stuff, this does not just apply to beads. So, of course, you could have drywall if you're building something related to a fiber, I suppose. But a lot of this is all kinds of construction. Let's see if there's anything else in here. When will this be effective? Again, 60 days after publication in the Federal Register. What happens if certain products are not available? Federal awarding agency may waive the application of the Buy America preference in any case in which it finds, and then a lot of this hasn't changed, that applying this Buy America preference would be inconsistent with public interest. And that could be that we're trying to get broadband everywhere, and because of this particular, it could be like chips, for example, that go in equipment that if you had, there can be lots of chips in a piece of equipment. So because of that, you could have well over 50% that are not sourced or made here in the United States. And that being the case, you would need a waiver on that, because let's say we could not deploy broadband quickly or economically feasibly in this country, then you can get a waiver for that. Types of iron, steel, manufactured products, or construction materials that are not produced in the United States in sufficient or reasonably available quantities or satisfactory quality. The inclusion of iron, steel, manufactured products, or construction materials produced in the U.S. will increase the cost of the overall infrastructure project by more than 25%. An unreasonable cost waiver. So again, sometimes you can get stuff overseas cheaper. It's amazing because you got to ship it over here, but the labor costs there are lower. So that's that quick short document. There's a much longer document with the text here. And you see this says pre-publication version. And it specifically says here, the official version may include technical or other revisions that are not reflected below. So this is the final guidance, but it's not the final guidance because they could have some additional technical or other revisions. And they have this pre-publication version and this down here, this caveat on every page of this document. So they want you to make sure you're aware of that. I wasn't going to read this whole thing. It's huge, but I was going to go through just a few areas here. So let's see what this says. Why did I highlight this? So the congressional findings recognize several policy justifications for establishing Buy America preferences. Oh yeah, this is the rationale, which again, I think is a good one. The policy rationale and the findings includes creating demand for domestically produced goods, helping to develop and sustain domestic manufacturing, and supporting millions of domestic manufacturing jobs. Again, those are all worthy goals. Congress also recognized that a robust domestic manufacturing sector is a vital component of the national security of the U.S. I totally agree with that. There's lots of things we don't manufacture here that we need to. And we discovered a lot of that during the pandemic, where we were having to go to other countries, and sometimes not friendly countries, to get things that we needed for the health of our citizens. And then we've got, again, I mentioned chips, the administration is trying to do stuff about chips as well. These are all important things that were, some of it became apparent again because of the pandemic. In addition, Congress recognized the importance of supporting domestic manufacturers that meet commitments of the U.S. to environmental, worker, and workplace safety protections. So, they're going to be, if you could be having stuff built in China and the conditions for the workers and those kinds of things can be horrible, and wages can be low. And that's one reason you can get stuff overseas cheaper. And, we have to, as Americans, we like to say we want to see things made here in the U.S., but we need to be prepared that we're going to have to pay more for stuff. if it's made in the U.S. And actually, we're running out of countries that will make stuff cheap. It's a lot of stuff that are coming out of other countries are starting to get more equal with what it costs to make here. So we just need to be prepared for that prices are going to go up. But again, it's good to make sure that people that are making stuff are not being mistreated, those kinds of things. So if it's made here in the U.S., there are rules to protect from that. In addition, let's say I already said that, these justifications are consistent with the policies of this administration set forth in some executive order to use terms and conditions for federal awards to maximize the use of goods, products, and materials produced in and services offered in the U.S. Summary of the comments. So most of this document, I'm not going to look at any of the comments. Most of the document is comments and the OMB's response. So it's comments from interested parties, I'm sure manufacturers and others, vendors, whatever, on this. So, I'm going to scroll through that, but basically that's what the rest of it is, except towards the end, I wanted to cover a couple of things down here as we get past all of the commentary and all of the response. It's somewhere right around here. So you can see that. You're welcome to, again, I'll link to this. You're welcome to go through that. So we got some definitions here. Let's see, I think I might have covered some of this. Construction materials means articles, materials, or supplies that consist of only one of the items listed in paragraph 1 of this definition, except as provided in paragraph 2, to the extent one of the items listed in paragraph 1 contains as inputs other items listed in paragraph 1, it is nonetheless a construction material. So again, fiber optic cable can include a couple of things that are in this list. So you've got, again, non-ferrous materials, again, the plastic and polymer-based products, which would be used, some of that would be used in fiber optic cable. Then you've got glass, used in fiber optic cable. That includes optic glass, as it says here. We saw that. Fiber optic cable, including drop cable, as we mentioned, optical fiber, lumber, engineered wood, and drywall. So we looked at that. Minor additions of articles, materials, supplies, or binding agents to a construction material do not change that categorization of the construction material. So if you've got something and just add something minor to it, it's not manufactured, it's still a construction material. Manufactured products means articles, materials, or supplies that have been processed into a specific form or shape. I think we already looked at this. Combined with other articles, materials, or supplies to create a product with different properties in the individual articles, materials, or supplies. And if an item is classified as an iron, steel product, a construction product, or a sections, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so we talked about that. So again, just the fact that, this would be, you would consider you would consider a fiber optic cable manufactured under this definition, but they've already placed it under here, under construction materials. Let's see. However, an article, material, or supply classified as a manufactured product of this definition may include components that are construction materials, iron, steel products, etc. So that's what they're saying. Produced in the United States means, we talked about this, 55%. So we talked about that. In the case of construction materials, all manufacturing processes for the construction material occurred in the United States. There was something else in here I thought I want to look at. Determining the cost of components for manufactured products. So for components purchased by the manufacturer, the acquisition cost, including transportation costs. So you're just basically calculating the cost of everything, including getting the material to you. It just doesn't include the profit. Construction materials, same thing, I think. Then we had fiber optic cable, including drop cable again. All manufacturing processes from the initial ribboning, if applicable, through buffering, fiber stranding, and jacketing occurring in the United States. So basically, fiber optic cable has got to be made here. All manufacturing processes also include the standards for glass and optical fiber, but not for non-ferrous materials, plastic, and polymer-based products or any others. But the actual manufacturing, where you're putting everything together, all of this stuff needs to be made here. And I think that was it. Now, here we go. Requesting a waiver. So you can request waivers. And it says here, the requesting, that would be the federal awarding agency must provide waiver request submission instructions and guidance on the format. So that should be forthcoming. Before issuing a proposed waiver, the federal awarding agency must prepare a detailed written explanation for the justification for that. So there'll be guidance on how to request a waiver. That will go back to the federal agency. The federal agency will then award that, but they have got to provide, may award that, I should say, but they've got to provide a detailed written explanation for the justification of that. And then before issuing a final waiver, that agency must make the proposed waiver and a detailed written explanation publicly available and provide a period of not less than 15 calendar days for comment. And unless the OMB directs otherwise, submit the waiver determination to be the Made in America office in the OMB for final review. Unless the director of OMB provides otherwise, they got to submit that to the Made in America office at the OMB, is what that's saying. Exemptions to the Buy America preference. So if there's a disaster, suddenly there's a disaster here in the United States and it impacts manufacturing here. Maybe there's a big plant that, in a particular area that gets taken out for some reason, some kind of disaster. If it's part of one of these various sections under the Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act, or pre and post disaster emergency response expenditures, something related to that. So anyway, that's just something to be aware of. And that is it. So there you go. Long document. Link to it. You can feel free to read through it. So they've clarified a few things since the initial version of this that came out back in February. A few things. I don't think there's any great surprises. I think a lot of people were not expecting them really to move on the fiber thing, and they did not do that. Again, if you want to read through all of the comments that people made and their response, you can do that through that document. So anyway, this gives further guidance. Again, it's not completely final, but once they publish this on the Federal Register, then it will become final after 60 days, and it will no longer be available here. So I am linking to it below, but I believe it's going to disappear. So if you're watching this, 90 days or so, whenever, if it's already up on the Federal Register, this preliminary final version will be disappearing at some point, and they will, or they may replace it. I don't know if it'll be the same file name, but they may replace it with the final document, but it'll be in the Federal Register there. So thanks for joining me. If this was helpful, interesting, whatever, if you give me a like on the video, give me a thumbs up, I'd appreciate that. Subscribe to our channel, click the little bell to be notified, and you will then know when I am live. See you next time. Bye-bye.